Hey, how's it hanging? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Crash Bang Boom podcast. Today's guest is drummer Travis Orbin of Darkest Hour, who is also a teacher and a session drummer and a whole lot more. I've been a fan of Travis playing and got to catch up with him and dig into everything from his setup to lessons both he took and is given, as well as his time in Darkest Hour and his philosophy on establishing balance with four-way independence and a whole lot more. You can catch Travis' solo releases on his Bandcamp page at Travis Orbin and get more info at his website at travisorbin.com. And that's Orbin for those of you who might not be sure about that. Crash Bang Boom podcast can be found on iTunes Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Luminary, Google Play, Podbean, and Amazon Music Podcasts. Feel free to check out any of the previous 200 plus episodes or give me a like, a subscription, or a positive review. Shout out to my sponsor, New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking to release vinyl, hit them up over at neworleansrecordpress.com and check out all the electroplating, mastering, design, packaging, vinyl coloring options, amongst a bunch of other NASA-like options that are primarily reserved for physicists. But they can simplify it for you. And not to mention, they got that real-time quote generator to add up all the goodness. They also print 12-inch, 7-inch records in 150 and 180 gram variants to do small runs of 100 and larger runs up into the thousands. So hit them up, and that's neworleansrecordpress.com. Do please keep tabs on artists offering live streams such as Darkest Hour, who is offering a whole video release, audio release, and a whole bunch of other stuff that you'll hear us talk about, as well as musicians offering tutorials and master classes, and selling merch and or physical releases that are up for sale, as well as websites like saverstages.com that are looking to provide some assistance to venues that are very much struggling in this time. So help out any way you can. Here we go. Travis Orbin. Sick drummer indeed. Crash, bang, boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Give the drummer some. Yeah! Travis Orbin of Darkest Hour. How's it going, man? How you making out, buddy?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing pretty good, man. How are you doing with this oftentimes sort of hermetic lifestyle that so many of us are living right now? Are you being pretty productive? Are you working stuff out, man? Are you working out all your rudiments? Are you getting it together, dude? Or are you slacking? Are you eating cookies and ice cream? What's happening? Are you working out?
Well, let me tell you, I am just blossoming. I mean, I've embraced kind of the monkish musician lifestyle since I've been a teenager. So,
yeah.
Other than not being able to tour, which is quite unfortunate, I miss traveling and performing. It hasn't really affected my life too much. And yes, I've been quite productive ever since everything started happening. I mean, I put out 3 records and an EP and a single last year,
Nice.
Solo material.
Awesome.
And I'm working on my next 5 records right now.
Damn, dude.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I did not prepare as well. Had I had known that you had some solo stuff out, I would have checked more of that out. I guess tell me a little bit about delving into that world. Had you done that prior to this COVID stuff happening, or was this kind of a product of this time?
No, I started putting out music and, well, really putting it out, like, Bandcamp and physical release and such.
Mm-hmm.
Started doing that in 2014.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Damn, dude. So you've been at it for a little while. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What's going on with Darkest Hour? I know that y'all have a live thing that y'all shot that y'all are putting out. Tell me a little bit about getting that together and what the happenings of it all.
Okay. Well, Mike Schleibaum came up with this kooky idea to get together and record and film a live set to act as a benefit for the Black Cat in D.C., a venue that has treated the band very well throughout its existence. And so we got together in, I believe it was late August of last year.
Okay.
And we had we tried to be as safe as possible. We had a skeleton crew. Black Cat had a skeleton crew. And we set up everything, lights, camera, action, ran through the set twice and cut it together.
Nice.
We're doing a limited run of vinyl and then I think at some point we first of all we debuted it via Veeps. That's right. That
Okay.
was a few months back, and the profits from that went to the Black Cat. And now we're doing the vinyl. And I don't know if we're going to do some sort of visual representation as well, but
Right.
vinyl is happening very, very soon.
That's awesome. Yeah, the link that I saw from your PR person, shout out Stephanie. It sounded great. So I thought I recognized the person's name that mixed it. Tell me about who mixed that, because I feel like is that a Swedish guy?
Yes, indeed. Matthias Nilsson. I'm not terribly educated on his discography, but I think he's been recording since the 90s. He's
Okay.
worked in various studios. I'm not sure when he became a transplant, but he's been working out of the Philadelphia area as well, where he resides. He has done front of house for the band for on and off. Not, he hasn't been our go-to
Uh-huh.
front of house guy, but when he's available and when we need him, he's been working with us. I don't know if he had done any tours prior to my joining in 2013, but he's worked with us a bunch, and yeah, and he engineered this and mixed it.
Nice. Yeah, it sounded really good. Since this all went down, aside from working on your own stuff, have there been any records that you've been especially digging or that have been in heavy rotation? I know I've had my own little obsessive little wormholes that I've gone through since March of 2020 that seem maybe especially apropos for the times, or was an escapism for how strange everything has gotten. But I've had a few obsessions. Have there been any records you've been especially digging on?
I'm really particular and I guess insular when it comes to my music tastes. I like to suss things out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gonna sound kind of surprising, maybe silly, but the early Nine Inch Nails stuff is what I've been sinking my teeth into.
Nice.
Although I am a child of the '90s, for whatever reason, they were just one of those bands I gravitated towards. I liked all the singles and the videos, especially were just very strange and surreal and enticing.
Mm-hmm.
But I never got any of the records. I was a kid, so an adolescent, so I didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of money, and there was already so much happening stuff coming out, and I just didn't take the plunge and get any of their stuff. But now I'm rectifying that, and yeah, I've pretty much been obsessed with the first three records and the Broken EP, and fairly recently, got obsessed with the Quake
Uh-huh.
soundtrack that he did,
Yeah.
which is really terrific.
Yeah, man. I started getting into electronic music and just kind of producing it myself. And because of that, I sort of circled back to Nine Inch Nails and kind of started digging into the production of those records and the sequencing of drums and or live drums, and then how all that stuff works together, and synths and intensity and mixes. And it's just, you can delve pretty hard into the production side of Nine Inch Nails. And that's something that I definitely found out recently as well.
That is equally interesting to me as the musical compositions themselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can tell he puts just as much thought into that side of things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, man. What is your setup, man? Do you are you able to play in your house, or do you have a studio that you go to, or how are you able to do? I know you mentioned that you recorded stuff. Did you go to other studios to do that, or are you pretty much set up to where you're a one man show and you can knock some tracks out?
I am a one-man show in the flesh. I have
Nice.
a separate building that houses my studio, my mother's dog grooming business, and and it has a garage.
Okay.
So I have my own studio, and yeah, I started investing in pro audio gear back in when was that? Like 2007, I think I made my first big purchase,
Okay.
and I've just been kind of building from there. I treated the room a little bit, not heavily, but like I laid hardwood floors and set up some sound traps and stuff, but
Nice.
pretty much good to go in that regard, and I get a pretty nice sound, I think.
That's awesome, man. I'll definitely have to check more of that stuff out. I was thinking back to the first time I saw Darkest Hour, and it was back in 2002, I believe. I actually had to look it up because there's no way that I would have remembered the exact date, admittedly. But I think it was February 8th of 2002. Darkest Hour. Dillinger Escape Plan was headlining. Darkest Hour opened for them, and All Else Failed was the opening band, and they came through the Shim Sham. What was the Shim Sham at the time in New Orleans, and it would later become One Eyed Jacks, and still is One Eyed Jacks. But there was two crazy instances. One, of course, Dillinger was amazing, and Greg had just pretty much joined the band, so they had put out the EP with Mike Patton, so it was kind of like the new guy was out, and they were just destroying. He was blowing fire and all this shit, so they were fucking amazing, as they always were. They're the band that I've seen the most. I believe I saw them 15 times. But yeah, it's a lot. And I saw him go quite a lot with Chris Penny, which was really crazy too. But so obviously that was Chris Penny era in 2002, pre-Miss Machine, and Darkest Hour opened. The last song of Darkest Hour, Chris Penny actually sat in and played the double bass outro. So like he just, the drummer at the time sort of stepped back. Chris Penny stepped in, and then he played the last song of Darkest Hour in the set, which was cool as hell. I don't know if they've ever told you about that, or if that, I don't know if, I mean, that hadn't have just been a one-off. I'm assuming it was like something they started doing on that tour.
I was not aware of that, actually.
Yeah, it was cool. And of course, when Chris Penny like got in there, and I can talk to infinity about him, but it was amazing hearing him with the different band and being like, of course he sounds amazing in this band as well. You know, he sounded so good. But the craziest thing about that show, hands down, was the opening band, All Else Failed. Their guitarist showed up late to the gig, and like right before they were about to go on. So there was people in the crowd there to see Dillinger and Darkest Hour. I don't know that many people knew about All Else Failed. But the main guitarist, I'm assuming it was his band, he body slams the guy on the stage, almost knocks him out, and he gets up and he's kind of dazed, and they're yelling at each other, and the guy storms off. And then, so the guy's rig was set up, but no one played it because he had stormed off the stage, just left the venue. I'm assuming quit the band. At some point, he had to come back and get his shit. But I was like, wow. So that's how that gig started. Was this dude getting body slammed on the stage and quitting the band.
An illustrious beginning.
I know. I was like, holy shit, man. And then, of course, like I said, Darkest Hour played. Chris Penny sits in. Dillinger comes out. Fire's getting blown. It was a pretty small, intimate club. It was a great show, man. So that was the first time I saw. And I mean, I was looking at the dates. I'm assuming that would have been off the first record if that was early 2002. So that's like So Sedated, or maybe, I guess y'all had The Mark of Judas, and So Sedated, So Secure was out at that point, but just a couple of records. So this was, nearly 20 years ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, very early on. I think Sadist came out in 2000. Was that 2001? Or was that 2003? Sure. I don't know, but well before the Devin Townsend influence, that kind of changed things a little bit. Not so much touring, but just the sound that the band tried to capture after those records kind of changed the ethos. But goddamn, that's so long ago.
I tell you what, man, congrats on Godless Prophets and the Migrant Flora. I think that record is killer. It reminds me kind of some of the earlier stuff, and sort of reverting back to when I saw Darkest Hour play with Dillinger that night. Some of that material, kind of the hardcore influence with some of maybe, the like In Flames or At the Gates kind of influence, and just sort of streamlined like that. And it's killer. And your drumming is especially amazing on that most recent Darkest Hour record, man.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you like it.
Oh, yeah, dude. There was one spot in particular in the second song, and I made a note, and of course I don't see the note now, about I was going to actually ask you something about specifically what it was that you were playing, because I couldn't quite figure it out. Maybe if once we end this, I'll try to figure it out and let you know what that spot was. But as for sort of where Chris Penny fits into the world of more intense, sort of high BPM technical drumming and whatnot, where do you sort of see him as an influence? Because it's something that I've said. I know that Dillinger kind of established a vocabulary that didn't really exist prior to that. And I've definitely heard the reverberations of that on a smaller scale as opposed to maybe someone bigger like Meshuggah, for instance, So I know like when Thomas Hake was doing his thing, you can hear the influence of Meshuggah. And now you hear a little bit of Dillinger here and there, but certainly Chris Penny was doing some crazy, crazy stuff back in that day. I was curious what you kind of thought about him, or if you had any thoughts about him.
I wouldn't consider him so much an influence, but certainly an inspiration. He kind of took what was sort of like a Bill Bruford approach and married it with a David Garibaldi approach.
I'm glad you said David Garibaldi because I've heard, I grew up with the David Garibaldi VHS instructional videos, and I learned a bunch of those grooves, and I can hear some of those grooves in Chris's playing. You're one of the only people that I've heard actually say that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and just kind of applied it in a more aggressive musical context and more aggressive drum orchestration context. Like you could take some of those grooves that he played with like the right hand on the china and just place it on the ride bell, and you've got a David Garibaldi kind of groove,
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really enjoy his playing, and I guess it's a shame what happened, but in retrospect, everyone went on to do their thing, and I'm sure they're happier because of it.
Right.
But yeah, it's still really deeply inspiring to go back and listen to that stuff and just listen to how unhinged it is.
Oh yeah. You said that maybe he was an inspiration, not necessarily an influence. When you think about your time with drumming, how long have you been playing?
I started on Christmas Day, 1995, so 25 years.
Wow. Yeah, I'm approaching 30. I started on my birthday, July 4th, with the kit at least in 1991. So this year it will be 30 years. So
cool.
Yeah, it's a hell of a long time to do anything, right?
Yeah.
That's a quarter century. You've been playing drums for a quarter century, man.
Quarter century. Yep. Blink of an eye.
Yeah, right? Were there some particularly influential people along those 25 years that you feel as though are still sort of informing your playing or still sort of baked in there,
Garibaldi.
Yeah. Yeah, same here.
Anytime I go to a ride bell groove, I'm like, all right.
Yep.
Assuming it's musically appropriate, I'm like, all right, there's going to be some sort of Garibaldi-ism in this.
Yeah.
Virgil Donati is another big one.
Wow.
Yeah, he is an influence, a huge inspiration, and the guy is still doing the damn thing, and he's in his approaching mid-60s now.
Are you kidding me? Virgil Donati's in his mid-60s?
Sure is. Yep.
Whoa, that's crazy. I did not realize that.
Yep. Yeah, and still sounds better than ever,
Yeah.
And Dennis Chambers.
Oh, yeah.
He was the first guy who broadened my horizon as far as what is a quote unquote super drummer.
Yeah.
because just prior to him, this was in the 90s. I was just, I was aware of 90s drummers like Dave Grohl and Lars Ulrich and Sean Kinney, et cetera, et cetera.
Of course.
But then Dennis comes along, and I wasn't really even, entrenched in jazz fusion, complex, sophisticated music anyway.
Yeah.
And he comes along and he's playing all this crazy shit with aplomb and style. And it just blew my mind. I got his VHS.
Yep.
Serious Moves.
Yep.
And Trim is the first song, and it's just if you can sit through that without being moved, I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a drummer. Jesus.
Yeah.
But Dennis is a big one for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I as well had his instructional video. I think I didn't have Serious Moves. There was one other one. I know he had two. I feel as though I had the other one. And I feel like they shot that all within the same day because he's wearing the same clothes, I think. It's the same kit. The bass player's still wearing that ridiculous shirt
Yep.
and the whole thing. So they shot it all. And I just thought it was funny when you would preview it because when you would watch those DCI music VHS tapes, they would always preview the other ones when you would watch it, And it was like, if you like Dennis Chambers, you could chat. And I was like, oh, shit, they shot this all in the same time. Same kit, same room, same clothes, same whole thing. 2 different videos. Good for them.
Yeah. Forget what that one was called, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. But I did not have that one. I had Serious Moves.
Interesting. Yeah, man.
I think it's called Funky something. I don't know.
I think so. Yeah. I think the VHS that I had of David Garibaldi was Tower of Groove, I want to say.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was the one. That was big for me, and I have mentioned it previously because I went through a phase of studying sort of like Afro-Cuban Latin stuff, and I was like, if I'm just playing rock or sort of whatever it is that I'm playing, I don't know how I'm going to use this necessarily. And it wasn't until I really got that David Garibaldi instructional video and heard his take on Latin patterns and grooves incorporated within sort of the context of funk grooves.
Yeah.
And I was like, ding, the light bulb went off. I had never pieced it together until I heard him do it. And I was like, oh, you can. I was just thinking traditionally, like, oh, I'm going to have to play in a samba band, or I'm going to have to play, like, attempt to play some of this Afro-Cuban stuff. But when I heard him, it changed my mind.
I need a flat ride and a double-headed bass drum, and I got to pitch up my toms, etc.
Yeah, man. You know, it's crazy. I have East Bay Grease, I believe, on vinyl. I have like 4 Tower Power records, but East Bay Grease in particular, when I play that, it's one of my all-time favorite sounding records. It's super live. It's super groovy. The bass is cranked in the mix. It's just one of the sickest sounding records, man. I
That band is just, I mean, they're known for being like surgeons.
totally.
They're so tight,
Surgical funk. You would think
Yeah.
that would not be kosher, but somehow Tower Power absolutely pulled that shit off.
Absolutely.
That's crazy, man. When you first started drumming, man, you had mentioned it was, I think you said 95. Why gravitate towards the drums in the first place?
It's probably going to sound like rehearsed or stilted because I've told this story a bunch, but there was always like an intrinsic interest in rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't beat on pots and pans, but I would just beat with my hands on literally anything. I would get in trouble for it in the grade school.
Yep, same here.
And yeah, and after some pleading, I got a practice pad and some sticks. And after a little more pleading, I got this really cheap little synthesizer kit, which I just tore to shreds. And then finally, after a few more years, my parents got me for my birthday and Christmas gift, because my birthday's 3 days before Christmas.
Ah,
Yeah, they got me my first kit. And yeah, literally the first time I sat down and played, I knew I was going to be doing this for the rest of my life. It just clicked. I felt comfortable.
right. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny when I think back to like my first kit. I got a great kit. It was one of the old. It was a Tama Superstar, I believe, that was like made in the '80s, and it was this big kit. And I have pictures of it. It was like I might as well was setting up my toms to where they were like a vertical wall, and I couldn't figure out why I was like tearing through my heads because I was just everything was set up weird. I didn't know any better. But it's funny to think back to that time, and then now, like I said, going on 30 years later, and think of the strides. But it did go by in a blink of an eye. But then again, when you think about the sort of the particular moments of gains, you can kind of isolate those, and then you realize, oh, I have been doing this a long time.
Right. Yeah.
At some point, did you start studying with somebody?
Yeah. My parents wanted to make sure it wasn't just a weird phase, so they let me just do my own thing for a year. And faithfully, every day I practiced. I would either just kind of noodle around and experiment, or I would play to the radio. And after a year, they got me lessons with a gentleman. I think he's still teaching to this day. He's about an hour north of me in Felton, Delaware.
Okay.
His name is Honey Bushell.
Honey Bushell.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I took lessons with him for several years and learned how to read, put me through a bunch of various texts. And then since then, I've only taken 2 other lessons. One with Mike Mangini.
Oh, wow.
In the mid 2000s, and another with a drummer named Bill Meligari, who lives in New Jersey.
Okay.
He was one of the, do you remember the world's fastest drummer competitions?
Yes.
In like the mid 2000s? Yeah. He was one of the mainstays in those competitions.
Wow. So I take it you learned some quick twitch hand technique potentially from him?
Both of those lessons really just kind of confirmed to me that the technique that I was already working on and delving into was working, and to just keep going down the path that I was going down. I learned a little bit more from Mangini, who stressed the importance of counting to me, and I also had both of his books, Rhythm Knowledge Volume 1 and 2,
Okay.
which I still kind of reference to this day.
Wow.
And so, I left that lesson with a little bit more on my plate, but their technique lessons were pretty invaluable. I actually took what they were preaching around that time and made up my own sort of practice technique. I call it the bare hand, barefoot. And so it's a marriage of two concepts that I saw videos of them demonstrating. Bill Malgari always preached the importance of unison strokes or flat flams,
Mm-hmm.
and Mangini once demonstrated in one of those World's Fastest Drummer clips. He was practicing bare hand strokes on a practice pad and trying to time them so that however many strokes he was doing per second would be congruent with the timer on the drummometer.
Right.
Really, really nerdy Mangini shit.
Yeah, totally.
And so I just took that and I made up this exercise where I do flat flams, bare hand, and I also incorporate the feet, and I just do it for an ungodly amount of time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, man.
And that's where the bulk of my technique is, from where it is derived.
Right, right. At which point did you start playing open-handed? Is that something that you learned from your initial teacher, and or when did you flatten your toms to where, the rack tom, which is traditionally elevated above the bass drum, became then on level with your floor tom, essentially?
I started flirting with open-handed playing really not too long after I started playing. Dennis kind of seamlessly switches back and forth.
Yeah.
And I also really like Carter Beauford.
I was going to say, when you said the 90s, I was like, I bet he was checking Carter Beauford out. It was impossible not to check that guy out. He's fucking amazing.
He's so good.
Oh, my God.
I started really simple. I think the first song I ever tried was Heaven Beside You.
Okay.
Alice in Chains. Because it has a really simple like quarter note
Mm-hmm.
hi-hat part in the verse. And so once I got that down, it just grew from there. And I started challenging myself, if I would stumble onto something really cool with my right hand, my dominant hand, I would recreate it with my left hand. And then in the mid 2000s, I joined this like pop rock band, and they already had an EP out, and the parts were really simple. I wanted to challenge myself, and all this sort of evolved at the same time into the culmination of the kit that you kind of know me for playing.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to backtrack a little bit. Actually, a few years prior, I was in this crazy tech metal band, which actually was influenced by Dillinger.
Okay.
But we were playing this gig, and we got there really late, and I was literally taking my drums out of the bags and setting them up on stage. And on a whim, I decided to play basically like a penny style kit, kick, snare, floor.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to add something to promote more left hand movement, and so that became the rack tom. And for whatever reason, it was easier for me to set it up like that than it was to get it in position in the front.
Huh.
I don't know why. So be it. So I just got accustomed to that, but I still had a very traditional, conventional cymbal setup.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a little more into Mangini's playing, and I noticed that he used he talks about it in interviews. He would use the cymbals to complement melodies and chord progressions. So I took a note from that, and I set up my lower pitch cymbals on the left and my higher pitch cymbals on the right. And that all sort of, this was like a step-by-step thing, but it all sort of culminated in that setup that I'm known for with the pop rock band. The aforementioned pop rock band.
Right.
So yeah, that's when the ride was permanently on the left, and I started using two differently pitched hi-hats, and so on and so forth.
Nice, man. And a lot of the videos that I've seen of you playing, man, you had mentioned that your initial teacher really strengthened your notating ability and or just reading ability. When you're orchestrating parts for Darkest Hour, for instance, is there a good bit of notation that goes into that? And is it sort of through composed with the fills and everything for you, or do you leave some space for improvisation, or is it pretty much you kind of set it in stone, notate it, and is that the way you sort of orchestrate the parts?
It depends how the song is conceived. We've always been a jamming kind of band. Well, not like like a jam band, but
Yeah.
we'll get in a room and we'll work out the song together,
Uh-huh.
which I've always appreciated, because there was a big chunk of time where I was in various projects, various bands where that wasn't the case. It was all computer composition and trading files through the internet and such.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that about this band and that aspect. And so what we'll do, let's say we have a song that Schlabbaum's come up with, who'll play it for me, and I'll just do a rough arrangement chart,
Mm-hmm.
like this riff for 4 times, this kind of groove, this riff, and then we'll just work through section by section, and then we'll take down a rough demo, and then he'll send it to me, and that's when I'll notate, and I'll start to flesh out some of the finer details, fills and such. Maybe I'll change the groove a little bit. Or another way, we are also a Guitar Pro driven band. So if someone comes up with a demo in Guitar Pro, they'll send it to me. That's happened a few times, and there won't be any drums. It'll be a blank canvas. So I'll write drums from scratch that way, which
Nice.
is a very, methodical, analytical kind of approach. But even then, if we write the song that way, we'll still jam it in person,
Right.
and throw ideas around.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also kind of like a hybrid approach, where we'll work something out in person and then notate it right then and there and go back and forth. And there's also like a straight up program drums, like with Superior Drummer, they'll send me something like that, and then I'll have to like make this actually playable because I don't have 3 arms.
Right.
and 3 feet.
Yeah.
So yeah, but there are various approaches, but like I said, a staple is playing in person. So I like that.
Nice. With teaching, one of the ways that I think I found out that you were even teaching was I interviewed Dave Bland of Full of Hell, and he mentioned that he took some lessons from you. I was asking him if he had ever really studied with anyone, and he said the only guy I ever really studied with was Travis Orbin. And I thought, oh, that's crazy. So I guess tell me a little bit about when you started teaching, and how has teaching sort of also informed your playing? Because I know sometimes, I'm not a teacher myself, but in sort of thinking about the process of it in teaching to students on different levels, you have to revisit a lot of the just fundamentals, which I think can also sort of reaffirm your own playing as well. So what has teaching sort of taught you?
Teaching hasn't been an enormous part of my income or career,
Uh-huh.
but I started teaching out of my studio, and then at one point I started teaching out of a local like mom and pop kind of instrument store,
Mm-hmm.
and that was cool because they would get a lot of business, a lot of the that big Christmas surge would occur,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd get a shitload of students, which would then inevitably taper off after like 3 months.
Right.
But David actually was one of those students, and I taught there for, I don't know, like a year or two, and then I just went back to teaching out of my studio because I had like barely anyone. Actually,
Right.
I think David was my last student, and I was like, you want to just come to my studio and I'll teach you there, and I don't have to give this guy a cut of the money.
Right. Absolutely.
And he's like, yeah, sure. So I taught him for a bit more, and for a while it was just really whoever wanted to make the trek to Delaware to take a private lesson with me. And then about a year and change ago, I started teaching a young gentleman. I think he's 14. I give him biweekly lessons right now,
Nice.
and that's pretty much my only regular student.
Yeah.
So like I said, it hasn't been a big part of what I do, and it hasn't really had an impact on me.
Mhm.
I've always been really grounded in the fundamentals and reading. I mean, I read constantly. My main thing I do really is session work
Right.
out of my home studio. So and the way that I do that is to be able to read charts. So I'm constantly reading, and it's a skill that's never left me. I never had to like refresh myself or anything. So
Right. Right. So the teenager that's your lone student presently, what does he come to you and ask you about? I mean, is he talking about 30-second notes over halftime grooves, and is he still watching Guitar Center drum off things and trying to figure out how to shred as maximally as possible, or asking you about animals as leaders, permutations, or what's going on? What is he coming to you with?
I think he's probably a few years away from that bombardment.
Right.
But he was totally totally green when he came to me. He was in, it's called rock band in
Yeah,
school.
of course. Yeah.
And so really that's kind of where his musical interests lie as well, like Led Zeppelin and
Awesome.
classic rock. Like he's never mentioned any like crazy prog metal to me.
Oh, wow. All right. I love it.
And he's kind of like in his own little, yeah, his own little classic rock bubble, I guess.
That is awesome to hear.
So yeah, my teaching with him is just, it's very fundamental, very information driven. You know, it's not like song driven or band driven.
Hmm.
So, you know, I have him in several books, and I give him exercises of my own concoction,
Right.
stuff that is actually deceivingly challenging, but and stuff that I didn't even tackle at his age. But you know, I can sneak it in, and he can get the gist of it, and it's really going to benefit him later.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. Speaking of prog metal, I didn't realize it until recently, but you were involved at the early formation, I guess, of Periphery.
Correct.
Okay, that's really interesting. I saw you playing some video, some of the songs, and I wasn't familiar with that particular song, and I was trying to figure out what that material was, but it was super shredding, man.
Yeah.
Just really, really killer stuff. And Misha's one of those guys with producing and helping with the sequence of drums on that first Animals as Leaders record, and then branching off and doing Periphery. He's sort of right at the forefront of sort of a lot of that movement. So tell me a little bit about sort of working with them and what that was about, and for that little stretch of time.
2006, I want to say. I found myself without a band for the first time ever since I graduated high school. I came to know about Periphery because they actually added a band that I was in a few years prior on MySpace as friends.
Okay, I know one. Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, the guitarist that I was in the band with, he was like, "Dude, check this band out. They sound like Meshuggah. They're sick."
Yep.
And so I was like, "Well, that's pretty cool." And those are programmed drums. That's interesting.
Right.
It doesn't sound like a drum machine. It sounds like kind of like a drummer.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
So yeah, when I was in that situation, it dawned on me like, oh yeah, there's that Periphery band. Let's see what they're up to. So I head on over to their MySpace page, and they were actually working with the drummer, but I still took it upon myself to contact Misha, who freely had his AOL Instant Messenger handle on the
Nice.
MySpace page. And I struck up a conversation with him, and I sent him some clips, like some drum solo stuff and some stuff that I cut with some bands. And he was like, "Man, you should audition." So I learned the song called "The Walk," and I filmed it with a digital camera that happened to have a video recording option. It was
Right.
like really bare bones.
Wow.
So, but it, obviously got the point across. So I sent him that, and he was like blown away. And he said, "Learn one more song, and you don't have to make a video. Just come to where they were in Columbia, Maryland, I believe, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Come here, and we'll rehearse or jam in person." So I did that, and I had the gig that day. And the guy they were working with, they were kind of not terribly excited about his progress. Took him quite a while to learn the material, so they were happy to have someone who could learn a song in a day or two.
Yeah, right.
So thus began. It was like 2 years of just like local regional shows and demoing, and nothing really official was ever released. But the parts that I helped write and program in those early days there are lots of flares of it that are present on the debut record.
Right. Super cool, man. I don't know. I'm assuming you've seen it, but you were the subject of the YouTube reacts craze that is permeating YouTube so heavily.
Right.
But of course, Jazz Drummer Reacts watched one of your videos, one of those Periphery songs, I believe, and he said at one point he said his mouth was agape, and he said that's what he does every time that he watches your videos, which was pretty cool. I was wondering what you thought about his reaction to your own playing.
Well, obviously it's flattering. I just hope those videos inspire people to actually, play drums and practice and not just gawk at.
Yeah, right.
'Cause it seems like there's so many of these like reacts things and like gear demos. It's like, just do the damn thing. Like, make music.
Yeah.
Stop watching other people react to music or react to making music. Like,
Right.
do it.
I know, right?
But at any rate, it's an entertaining panegyric.
Right. Totally, man. So in addition to your own solo stuff that you'll continue working on in 2021, does Darkest Hour have some new material coming out outside of this live thing? And when is this sort of live thing coming out in its various forms?
All right. So what is today? Today is January 29th. In about a week, the audio and I believe the video will be available to our Patreon supporters.
Okay.
And then I believe in March, it will be available to the general public, including a vinyl pressing.
Right.
We are slowly piecing together album 10, but I really can't say anything further than piecing it together. Who knows? We just lost a guitarist, and John Henry has been living in Europe since like midsummer.
Oh wow.
So it hasn't slowed anything down, but well, it's put a little bit of a damper on it. But
Yeah.
things are still in motion. Gears are still in motion. So I don't know. I can't, like I said, I can't say anything further, but it is something that's still a priority to us, and we're working on it.
Awesome, man. Very, very cool. Well, yeah, man. Travis, thanks for rapping with me, man. I've been a fan of your playing, and best of luck in 2021. And one of these days I'll have to hook up with you for a lesson, because I would have some double bass and or hand technique questions for you that hopefully you could help me with.
Sounds fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Travis for rapping. Definitely cool picking his brain about some of the technical aspects of his own playing, his setup, philosophy about just independence and balance, and all that good stuff, which is one of the reasons why he's such a sick drummer. So it's definitely cool talking to him. Hope y'all enjoyed it, and we'll catch you on the next one. Crash, bang, boom!